Yo, what is up? I am V, and today I am going to break down the definitions of critical literacy versus that of just plain old-fashioned digital literacy. There are some real big similarities, but there are also a lot of big differences between these two definitions, and that's exactly what I'm going to show you today. So these are both academic terms, one being a little bit more outdated than the other, but both holding significance in the realm of educational technology and just learners in general. The zeitgeist of today, these two terms are holding quite a bit of weight. So first up, I'm going to discuss the one that we all probably grew up with if you are around, a 90s baby, and that's the term of digital literacy. Digital literacy is just the idea that we as humans, as learners, as young learners, can acquire the skills needed. So whether that's ethical skills, the cognitive skills, or the technical skills to use information that we have gathered using technology to create something new. So the boiled down definition of digital literacy is that humans can acquire the skills, whether those skills are ethical skills, the cognitive skills, the technical skills, to use information that we've gathered from technology like smartphones, right? Like computers, anything that has access to the internet or databases to perform, analysis, to communicate. It's just finding the information we need using tech. In simple terms, it is humans using the technology to find information, using that information, and turning it into something more meaningful, like a YouTube video essay, or a podcast, a research study. Now, that's kind of an outdated term, though, and as someone who's in the educational technology field myself, I have noticed a big shift away from this simplistic, basic way of thinking of how to use technology as a means to produce anything. And instead, educators are beginning to apply more of a sociocultural and culturally responsive approach to discussing digital literacy in 2022. So the term critical digital literacy is beginning to move away from that personal responsibility of, those three kinds of skills I mentioned before, the ethical, the technical, and the cognitive skills, and beginning to introduce a more social approach to considering where the information that we gather actually comes from. What are the cultural impacts of the technology that we're using, the tools that we use? So let's unpack that term now. Let's unpack critical digital literacy and how that is differing from that older sense of just digital literacy. So Molly Roquet is an educator and librarian from Oakland, California. They've been studying digital literacy as a librarian. It's one of those key curricula aspects to being a librarian is teaching, media literacy, digital literacy. Her job is to literally teach young learners how to acquire information and use technology tools to do so. And this educator has been preaching the critical literacy gospel for some time now. This is what she's saying about digital literacy and its outdatedness. She says, digital literacy curricula tends to focus on individual behavior and responsibilities, such as do protect your private information, don't cyberbully your classmates, do use citations, those kinds of things. So the biggest difference between the critical digital literacy and digital literacy is just the scope of the consideration of context, really. The OG digital literacy lessons often aim to correct the behaviors of the user, right? So that maybe is a misbehavior as well. Also, building academic skills, like very straightforward. OG digital literacy does that. Like, how are we going to collect this? How do you cite this, et cetera, et cetera. But the traditional sense of digital literacy does little to actually raise awareness for social context, social issues around the technology that they're using to acquire this information. As we know, most information consumed was created from some entity, from somewhere, and usually that somewhere has some sort of bias and a social context. And that's at the heart of what differs critical digital literacy versus digital literacy. Critical digital literacy truly does ask the learner to consider and move beyond just the surface context of the information that they're gathering. Critical digital literacy is the ability to seek context, to imagine the alternatives, and build agency to create change based off of the information that we collected. So now we're going to put it all into context. Let's use some concrete examples so we can begin to think of this visually. Digital literacy says online bullying is bad. Don't be a cyberbullying. No one likes that. It's not good. Okay. Critical digital literacy takes a step beyond that and says, hey, Let's look at our social media influences. How are these companies tweaking algorithms to maximize engagement and profits and choosing to amplify vitriol and misinformation for engagement purposes? Why are we influenced to be cyberbullies? That critical way of examining where and how information is being disseminated can deeper any learner's perspective, and actually they'll begin to be more emotionally invested and be maybe that agent of change. In fact, this way of thinking has been backed up for a long time. When we're socially involved with learning to consider our peers' perspectives, we actually learn about ourselves more. Back in 1934, learning philosopher and psychologist, Russian named Leo Vygotsky.
Vygotsky.
Okay. Vygotsky. He introduced the sociocultural learning theory. And in this theory, there's a quote that really accurately sums it up. Through others, we become ourselves.
Through others, we become ourselves.
So in fact, this way of thinking has been backed up by learning theorists for a long time. So the idea that we must consider these social factors and take into account how these learners are being impacted by peers, companies, social scenarios, all sorts of factors that a learner's acquisition of information can be impacted by, it's crucial. So here's my pitch for critical digital literacy versus that of the plain old digital literacy is we got to take it a step beyond. Because when we take a step beyond the surface level context and start digging in deeper and finding how these tools have an impact on society and ourselves, that's critically thinking. That's where we develop ourselves better. So instead of just being a cheerleader for new technologies or books, I would recommend that we model this critical approach to learning, to thinking and examining all aspects of the tools that we use, especially as they keep developing. And it is so fun to explore these new tools, but it's even better to examine where these tools are coming from. Everything that we do as educators, as learners, should empower ourselves and the communities that we're involved with to change. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, you know what to do. Check out that video. You can check out that video. You could also like and subscribe for more content. Peace.